Hey everyone, Dan here. We are during Power Hour on Thursday, July 8th. Today we're going to take a look at CleanSpark. Before we get into it, if you enjoy these videos, please hit the like and subscribe button. It helps a lot. And also, if you would like to receive a once or twice a week email newsletter from me starting in August, I'll put a link in the description below to a Google form where you can throw your email in. And then once I'm ready to launch the email, I'll send folks a note and basically saying, here's what it's going to be, and here's when it's going to start. If you are no longer interested, no worries. Here's how you can opt out. So toss your email in there if you're interested in having another place to receive some trade ideas, catch up on some plays that I put videos out, and I just don't have time to do updates on everything that I see, but I can stick a bunch more in a newsletter. All right, so CleanSpark, is having a bit of like a flat day today. Today on a day when the market overall had a bit of a wacky day. Take a look here. We can see market's down quite a bit actually, nearly a full percent with the S&P and the Dow, over 0.5% with the NASDAQ, but you see it was beaten down pretty solidly here in pre-market. We were opening up down well over a percentage point in all the indices. So CleanSpark faring quite well as it pertains to that broader context. But in this video, I thought we would go ahead and take a look at the trend, and then we'll plot out some price targets to the top and the bottom, so both the bullish and the bearish scenarios. And then we'll flip over and look at some data that could be sort of like factors coming into play for CleanSpark in the weeks ahead. So right now, this is the 3-month, 2-hour time frame that we're on, just to get sort of like a broader context and understanding of where we are. So we're sort of like in this low to mid range here at 1558 currently. So I'm going to start to grab a couple of things. One, it's in this sort of like slightly down channel while being sort of like, well, let's do it this way. It was in this up channel, right? So it was here in this nice up channel, and it broke through that. And we see this a lot of times when a stock tries to blow through. It could be the bottom, but also the top bound of the channel, and it can't develop support over that and truly just like break the channel. When it enters back into the channel, we often see it struggle and then fall through the lower half of the channel and break it all together. Or I should say the lower bound of the channel and break it all together. So we're just looking at another stock that had that exact same occurrence last night. But basically what happened is it fell through, and now it's developing essentially in this slightly down channel. So here's your red down channel. Here is your green up channel. And so just know that's, I looking back in the history of CleanSpark, it does often develop these channels, and it has a lot of relatively steep channels. So this down one, luckily for anyone holding or for any CleanSpark bulls out there, this is not a terribly steep down channel. It's pretty respectable, and I think it has a lot of opportunity to break this. So let's look at some of the price targets that we could look for support and resistance, and go from there. So I'm just going to start choosing some areas where there's been a lot of support and resistance occupied by the same price zone over a period of time, and those are typically very, very strong zones in order to pick up some support and resistance. So you see support, resistance, resistance, support, 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 and now we'll be looking for 1619 to be that first area where CleanSpark goes ahead and tries to turn it into resistance. That's the first step to flipping it to support. So that's sort of like the transition that we're going to want to look for if it starts to recover and has some price strength. So a bunch of really solid channels here, meaning like really clean, obvious points at which things are flipping from support to resistance and vice versa. The other interesting thing is usually with a stock that's this low cost or this low price, we would see these areas being much, much closer together. But these have a solid like $1 to $2 or more in between some of these spaces. So it does have some pretty good run room in different areas, which is nice to see. I'll throw in this one here. I think this one could be a little bit tricky just because I don't think it's as like strong as the others, but there's so much run room between 1792 and 2034 that it could actually become quite sticky. If folks are, I don't know, happy to sort of like take profit in that range, or if they're just a little uneasy and feeling like at its first initial runs up to those areas that it feels overextended to them, so I would just keep an eye on those. And then to the downside, we saw it recently bounce off this 1489 zone, so I would look for that to continue to hold, and if it can't, probably looking down to that 1397 for the next area of supports. And then after that, I'm happy to throw in like one additional spot here, right about 1229 there. There should be additional support if it needs it, right in that area there, but I know that percentage-wise, it's a pretty big swing down, so I'm sure folks aren't looking for it to do that. But that's what I would look for to the up and the downside. Let's take a look at the indicators to see, there might be some buying pressure or selling pressure coming in. So it's sitting relatively low in the RSI, just above 40 right now. So recently, was in oversold territory a few days ago. I guess this was a couple weeks ago at this point. It's a 4-hour time frame. So, but anyway, through this consolidation, it did move up a bit, but mostly just consolidated sideways from there to there. And then with this recent sell-off, it didn't quite get into oversold, but it knocked on the door. And then, it's trying to make a push up now. So what I would look for on this as like an initial show of price strength is for it to at least establish over the midline of the RSI. You see the last couple of times that it tried to do that, it peeked its head over, but then very quickly fell back through. And you see it did it again here, made a couple of attempts at getting over 50, and it just couldn't hold it. Versus you see areas of more price strength where it goes toward overbought territory and then comes down to the mid-range and can generally hold it, and then it makes another run, comes down to the mid-range, and then makes another run, comes down to the mid-range. And you see this, just like if you were charting the candles, you see this making lower highs as an indication, that there could be a potential sell-off coming. And similarly here, you see this making higher highs as it's starting to run up price-wise as well. So keep your eye on the RSI. This does seem to do a pretty good job respecting that in terms of being able to identify some trends. So right now it's looking like, kind of a downturn on the shorter time frame here, or the more recent areas of the RSI, versus this area here. I would have liked to see this peak up a little bit further to kind of extend well above this 57.69 zone that it was at previously. So it did make a slightly higher high, but I would have rather liked to see it in trend line with this one to here. But let's see if we can make another run up and what that might look like. MACD, for all intents and purposes, relatively flat, certainly no large swings like we saw here and here, so mostly just a consolidation through this area, but especially in this zone here, everything is generally flattening out. It's the MACD itself sitting below the baseline, so plenty of room to swing to the upside if it can have a bullish crossover and kill the rest of this bearish momentum. But it's also going to need to build some bullish momentum because, right now we've just seen these areas of the histogram that are green die down from basically this point through these points and now to this very small areas of the histogram there. So I think it's kind of trying to choose a direction at the moment, to be honest. Obviously, it retraced from all of this attempted move upward. And so now it's, we'll see if it can catch itself at this 1489 or if it comes down and it needs that 1397 or 1229. All right, let's flip over and take a look at the data, see if there's any indications there of sort of what we might be able to look for with CleanSpark. So popping over here, let me say before we go through the data, if you enjoy this video or any of my other videos and you share or talk stocks or trading on any social place like Reddit, Twitter, Facebook, I would love it if you were compelled to share these videos there. That would help the channel a lot. I am trying to grow the channel, so I appreciate anyone kind of helping spread the word. All right. So, one thing that stood out to me was this growing interest on institutional ownership. So right now it's sitting just above 21% of institutional ownership, but you see this really nice swing up for the last 3 quarters. No institutional sells in Q4 of 2020, but 13 million bought in, 16 million bought in then in Q1. So even though that seems like a small increase, the fact that it's piling on after a nice jump up to another nice jump up, cumulatively speaking, that's actually really important and really a good sign from an institutional perspective. It might bring some additional, obviously, buying pressure and weight to the stock, but also potentially could help stabilize it out a little bit. If there's not a bunch of institutions running for the exit, of course. Just 1.78 million sold, and then a big jump up in Q2 2021 to 64 million bought, just 9.14 million sold. So definitely a lopsided disbursement there. That's not the word I'm looking for, but many more buys than sells coming in from the institutional perspective. So take that for what you will, but it is an interesting data point from my perspective. Just 2 ratings on CleanSpark right now. 2 buy ratings, but it does have this enormous upside. They are averaging out to $47.50 dollars per share, and so that's over 200% to the upside. So again, this isn't because I think the analysts are necessarily right in their price targets, but to the extent to which institutional investors, funds, and or large blocks of retail investors do make decisions based on the projected or possible upside based on the analyst ratings, that could help bring some folks in, thinking that it's at a really good deal if there is 200% to be made in the near future. There is definitely some relatively high. I mean, it's hard to say at this weird time in the market, what a high a short interest is, but we do see Ortex today estimating 19.87% of the float is being shorted. So that is pretty high. We do see the exchange reported short interest increasing here as of late, and the estimated short interest by Ortex also coming up quite significantly lately. So I would keep an eye on that, the daily volume and sort of like the borrows that are coming out, in order to see if shorts are piling in and potentially skewing the perception of the stock. We do see here, I don't know why this isn't updated yet, but the short volume ratio is relatively high, like in the mid-20s is pretty high. So they are coming in more and more the last few days, as we see. And then from interactive brokers, they are showing a relatively low availability of just 300,000 shares available to borrow. I didn't actually look to see what the free floats that CleanSpark has. So, okay, so it's relatively low, just 30.9 million in the free float. So, that's being said, this 300K isn't super like, out of range for what you would expect to see in sort of like a mid tier, again, these days, shorted stock, which previously 10% was considered pretty attention grabbing, and then over 20% was like, holy smokes, this is super heavily shorted. But like I said, today with everything that's going on, we're looking more in like the 30s and 40s or higher for a percentage of the free float being shorted to really sort of like start shouting from the rooftops. So that being said, just technically speaking, this is very high. So I would just keep an eye on that as well, to the extent that like shorts come in to try to drive the price down, while institutions seem to generally be buying it up. And there is this really outsized to the upside average price target by analysts. All right, well, that'll do it for this video. I hope that gave you some thoughts and ideas to sort of mix with your own due diligence and your own concept of CleanSpark and where it could be headed and that sort of thing. But I hope you're having a good trading week, and I wish you the best no matter what you're trading, and I will see you in the next video.